We just went through the Belgian Grand Prix weekend in Spa, and it was a bit lackluster to say the least. Yeah, we had a good battle at both the start of the race and at the start of the sprint, but there were very few overtakes during the race itself, and the only ones happening at the end of the Kemmel Straight. But that isn't what I'm referring to. I'm talking about the 80-minute rain delay, and with next week's race in Hungary being forecasted for rain, is it going to happen again? With an hour and a half of standing water on the track, watching the medical car do laps upon laps, when the rain had stopped for over an hour, and the FIA not batting an eye at the wet tires, there is an issue that needs to be addressed. Now, I'm not saying that the cars should have been racing, and the justification of how the safety was at risk is completely right, and that's not what I'm here to disagree with. Spa itself is a very dangerous track, and we've seen proof of that with it taking the lives of multiple drivers in the past. It's completely right in being worried about the drivers wanting to resume the race, but the problem is not the concern of aquaplaning, it's visibility. With the amount of standing water on the track, and through what Lando Norris was saying on the radio before the delay, the driving conditions were not what was the issue, it was the amount of spray. Lando said on the radio, "I can't see a lot behind the safety car, so I can't imagine what it's like for everyone else." And when asked whether the main problem was aquaplaning or visibility, Norris replied, "Visibility. The standing water is not too bad." Notice the main point here being that the visibility was a huge issue and the cars were fitted with inters. This means that there's a level of water beyond what we saw that the cars can handle. But with the amount of spray from the new regulations, we don't even see that. Ever since the changes in 2022, with more ground effect and 18-inch wheels, the amount of spray the car kicks up is ridiculous. Because of this, cars following have to just follow the rain lights from the car ahead and travel through a cloud of mist, hoping to not get caught off guard. Now, looking at specifically what happened at the past race this weekend, there are two real issues with the problem we had: the wet tires being unusable, and how the FIA handled the situation. First, we're going to look at what they could have done better in the moment, because that's what directly could have helped. Through all the standing water, the FIA pulled the cars into the pit lane and waited for the track to dry, even though we can physically see that the rain had stopped. They sent out the medical car, being the Aston Martin DBX, to go around the track and scope out the situation. Meanwhile, we see hundreds of shots of the camera crew zooming in on the drivers' faces in the garages. In my mind, the issue could have been solved by having the cars out on track behind the safety car. If you look at all of the wet Grand Prix we've had in the past, there's a drier line created on track because of cars running at high speeds through the racing line areas on the track. And that's the whole reason drivers go faster on slicks in conditions that look like the surroundings are still very, very wet. It just does seem like a lot of wasted time when the cars could be out on track, when we know that from the radars there's no more rain coming. To me, it's just a weird thing to be so procedural about when weather is such a changing factor that you have to adapt to, not only as a driver, but as an officiating board. Anyways, the deeper reasoning to why the visibility is so bad is just the lack of ability in the wet and inter tires. Well, I shouldn't say lack of ability, because the wet tires do their job at driving well in rainy conditions and being capable of dispersing 85 liters of water per second, or 22.5 gallons if you speak in freedom units. The inters also displace about 30 liters, or 8 gallons per second, covering that middle ground, but the issue comes from the spray. With the current aerodynamics of Formula 1 and the huge tires, the amount of spray is ridiculous. Like, just look at the cloud. Because of this, the wet tires have become somewhat of a meme in the F1 community because we quite literally never see them on track, and they really are just never used. It's genuinely hard to remember the last time we've had a race where the wet tire was truly viable to run, and it takes away from a big part of the sport. Wet weather races have always been a thriller to see, with tricking conditions, tons of offs, and the cars struggling to stay on track. But because of how sessions are delayed now, the majority of wet races nowadays are inter races that transition to dry, or the opposite. The aerodynamics are also to blame for this, with the current car relying heavily on downforce in venturi tunnels, which are under the car, as opposed to mainly from wings like in the past. A majority of the standing water is pushed underneath the car to the back and expelled at high speeds through the diffuser. The diffuser is also made to direct air upwards behind the car, which, when replaced with water, flings it up in this very high, fine mist that doesn't settle very well. There were plenty of iconic racing moments that were forged in these wet races, like Max Verstappen shredding through the pack in Brazil 2016, Michael Schumacher getting his first Ferrari win in 1996, Vettel winning for Toro Rosso in 2008, and plenty more incredible moments that were made through these conditions that we no longer really see anymore. From what I've seen online, plenty of fans are mad with the situation, and I'm sure there are many people within Formula One that are also frustrated, and that has caused them to look for some solutions technically, but it is very tough. Finding a balance between safety of the drivers, capable technology, and potential for good racing is not something that is easy to come by. Finding one specific solution would be very tough, and actually testing said solution would be even tougher because it's hard to replicate those types of conditions. But it is possible. The first idea comes through spray guards. F1 has already toyed with the idea, and we've even seen testing of them on the Ferrari in May of last year. But there was no benefit found in the design that was tested. The benefit was there, but very marginal, as the aerodynamics still directs so much water to the diffuser, which just kicks up a ton of water. According to the FIA's head of single seater matters, the wheel cover was stopped after that testing, as the current design was not going to deliver the change that was hoped for. F1 previously tested a smaller design at Silverstone, but that was labeled as too small and flimsy, and that's why they opted for the full wheel cover design in the Ferrari test in Fiorano. But that obviously didn't make much of a difference either. Now, with the issue being the diffuser, you're probably wondering why they don't just make a spray guard for that. But the truth is that it would hamper downforce too much, and it would overall make it tougher for the car to stay gripped on track. Ultimately, that idea can still be pursued, but it would take a whole new design to find the solution as a whole. There are some other technical options that could be attacked, like aero revisions. With the regulations next year moving away from Venturi tunnels and moving back to a flat floor design, it'll be easier to approach the matter. Cars will be higher off the ground, and a significant amount of the downforce will be contributed by the wings instead of the floors. This will still have air going through the floor and diffuser, just less than the current regulations we have. With that being said, it should help the spray because there will be a lot less kickup and it won't go as high, meaning that there will be a better opportunity to follow in the wet. But obviously, this is just what the FIA is shooting for, and we'll only see in due time if that is the case. The only other real place to point is the tires again, but by the wheel covers, we know that really isn't something that's able to be changed easily. The actual function of wet driving is something that the tires do well, and they have remained largely unchanged from when they were used over a decade ago. They've just gotten larger. The truth of the matter is that it's very difficult to find the balance between the ability to race and safety of drivers in such treacherous conditions. But if a solution isn't found soon, we can expect a lot more delays and a vital aspect of racing being phased out of the sport for good.